The sun was shining brightly over the small, busy auto repair shop on the corner of the street. The smell of oil, grease, and gasoline filled the air, mixing with the sounds of wrenches clanging, engines revving, and tires squeaking as mechanics went about their work. In this shop, there was a quiet rhythm, a balance of hard work, skill, and determination. Among the mechanics, there was one man who stood out, not because he was loud or flashy, but because he had a talent that spoke for itself. He was a humble black mechanic, known in the neighborhood for his incredible skill with engines. People often said he could fix almost anything, and when he worked, it was with a level of precision that left others amazed. He didn't boast about his abilities, he just let his work do the talking. On this particular day, the calm of the shop was about to be disrupted by an unusual visitor. A sleek, black luxury car rolled into the parking lot, turning heads instantly. The engine purred, the tires glinted under the sun, and the car itself seemed almost like a statement of power and wealth. Stepping out of the car was a woman who immediately drew attention, not just because of her expensive attire and confident walk, but because of the aura of authority that surrounded her. She was the CEO of a well-known company, a woman respected and feared in the business world for her sharp mind and commanding presence. Her reputation preceded her, she was known for being witty, bold, and sometimes a little unpredictable. She had the confidence of someone who was used to getting what she wanted, and the shop instantly felt her energy the moment she stepped inside. As she entered, the mechanics paused, some curious, others cautious. She didn't waste time with formalities. Instead, she walked directly to the mechanic, the one who had quietly been working on a car in the corner. She studied him for a moment, her eyes glinting with mischief and challenge. Then, with a playful smile that carried both teasing and authority, she said words that made the room go completely silent, "If you repair this engine, I'll marry you." There was a mixture of shock and disbelief. Some mechanics laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. Others frowned, unsure of how to react to such an unusual statement. Even the customers in the waiting area stopped what they were doing, their attention now fixed on this bold interaction. The CEO's words were outrageous, audacious, and entirely unexpected. To many, it seemed like a joke, a ridiculous challenge thrown out on a whim. But the mechanic, who had heard countless challenges in his life but none like this, didn't react with laughter or anger. He simply looked at her calmly, his eyes reflecting quiet focus rather than fear or confusion. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed down in the shop. The smell of oil seemed sharper, the ticking of the clocks louder, as everyone waited for the mechanic's reaction. The CEO, leaning slightly against the car, crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow, as if daring him to respond. She was used to people reacting instantly to her presence, some with admiration, some with fear, but she had never seen anyone take her seriously in this way before. She expected a quick laugh, a flustered answer, or maybe even a refusal. But instead, the mechanic merely nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the challenge without needing to say a word. This silent acceptance changed the mood in the room. What had started as a playful dare suddenly carried weight. The CEO's challenge wasn't just about repairing an engine, it was about proving skill, intelligence, and determination under pressure. The mechanic, aware of the eyes watching him, understood that this moment was bigger than just a car. It was a test of his abilities, a chance to show that talent and hard work could speak louder than words or social status. The CEO's laugh, which had been bold and teasing at first, faded into a curious smile. She was intrigued. Here was someone who didn't react with arrogance, fear, or desperation, someone who seemed completely confident in his own quiet way. The other mechanics whispered among themselves, wondering what would happen next. Some thought the challenge was impossible, others were secretly rooting for him. The engine itself, an old and complex piece of machinery, sat quietly, almost like a sleeping challenge waiting to be awakened by skill and determination. In that moment, the shop transformed. It wasn't just a place where cars were repaired anymore, it became a stage for something extraordinary. The bold words of the CEO had sparked a challenge that carried humor, tension, and the possibility of something life-changing. The mechanic, calm and focused, understood that this was not about winning a joke, it was about showing that talent and humility could command respect even in the most unusual circumstances. As the first part of the story ends, the stage is set. The bold challenge has been made, the players are in place, and everyone in the shop knows that something remarkable is about to happen. The air is filled with anticipation, curiosity, and a subtle tension, because no one could have predicted that a simple dare about an engine would become a story that people would talk about for years to come. The mechanic didn't flinch. He didn't laugh, and he didn't rush to reply. Instead, he took a slow, steady breath, letting the moment sink in. Around him, the shop buzzed with whispers and nervous glances, but he seemed untouched by the eyes and opinions of others. To him, the CEO's challenge wasn't about jokes or attention, it was about work, skill, and proving that dedication could overcome doubt. He crouched next to the engine, fingers brushing the cold metal, feeling its weight and complexity. He had worked on engines of all shapes and sizes, but this one had a reputation even among mechanics, tricky, stubborn, and unforgiving. He smiled faintly, not out of arrogance, but because he loved challenges. Every dent, scratch, and twisted pipe was a puzzle waiting to be solved, and he thrived on solving the impossible. As he examined the engine, he noticed small details that others might have missed, a subtle crack here, a worn-out part there, and the way certain pieces didn't align perfectly. Most people would have been intimidated or overwhelmed, but he saw patterns, solutions, and possibilities. His mind worked like a clock, methodical, precise, and unstoppable. Meanwhile, the CEO watched closely. Her amusement was slowly turning into intrigue. She had thrown out the challenge expecting a funny moment, maybe even a failed attempt, but this quiet, focused man was different. There was a calm confidence about him that made her pause. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't showmanship. It was pure skill, tempered with patience and humility. She had never seen anyone approach a problem with such quiet power. The mechanic worked steadily, methodically, blocking out the laughter, the whispers, and even the pressure of a life-changing promise. To him, it was never about the reward, it was about proving, to himself and the world, that dedication, focus, and talent could overcome any challenge. Every twist of a wrench, every adjustment, every careful movement was a small step toward mastery, toward showing that work done with integrity always speaks louder than words. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The shop, once filled with casual chatter and background noise, had fallen into a respectful silence. Everyone could see that something extraordinary was happening, not just a repair, but a demonstration of patience, precision, and determination. The mechanic's hands moved with confidence, almost like a dancer performing a carefully choreographed routine. The engine, once stubborn and unyielding, began to respond to his touch. At that moment, the CEO realized that this wasn't a game. The mechanic wasn't performing for her, he was proving something far bigger. He was showing that skill, focus, and humility could win respect in ways that money, status, or power never could. She leaned back, watching silently, admiration creeping into her gaze. The quiet determination of this man, so different from anyone she had ever met, was impossible to ignore. By the time he wiped the sweat from his brow, a small crowd had gathered around, witnessing a moment of quiet brilliance. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The mechanic's determination was loud enough. In that shop, on that ordinary day, something extraordinary was unfolding, a story of focus, skill, and perseverance that would soon captivate everyone who heard it. And so, the stage was set for the next part of the story. Could this humble mechanic, with nothing but his talent and determination, rise to meet a challenge that seemed impossible and change the way everyone saw him forever? The mechanic rolled up his sleeves and began working on the engine with a quiet intensity that drew every eye in the shop. It wasn't just about turning bolts or tightening screws, it was like watching an artist at work. Each movement was deliberate, precise, almost poetic. He had a rhythm, a flow that came from years of practice, mistakes, and countless late nights in the garage. Every mechanic in the room felt a mix of awe and curiosity. They had seen engines fixed before, but never like this. He started by inspecting the engine meticulously, his hands moving over every surface, listening for subtle differences in sound, feeling for irregular vibrations, and examining every connection. Most people would have missed the tiny signs of wear, the hidden cracks, the parts that didn't quite fit, but not him. His eyes seemed to see inside the engine, as if he could sense its problems before touching them. The CEO, still leaning against her car, watched closely, her earlier amusement replaced by genuine intrigue. She had thought this would be a short, playful moment. Now, she realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. Hours passed, but to the mechanic, time didn't matter. He worked steadily, methodically, tackling each problem one step at a time. There was no rush, no panic, no need to impress anyone. Each spark plug he replaced, every belt he adjusted, every delicate wire he fixed was a testament to his patience and skill. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but he didn't flinch. He treated the engine as if it were a living thing, deserving attention, care, and respect. The shop was silent except for the gentle clinking of tools and the occasional hum of an engine coming back to life under his hands. Even the other mechanics stopped their work, watching with a mix of admiration and disbelief. They had heard about his talent, but seeing it in action, especially under the pressure of the CEO's challenge, was something entirely different. The CEO's eyes widened slightly as she realized that this humble man was not just repairing an engine, he was transforming it. What had seemed like a simple task was becoming a display of mastery, determination, and heart. She had expected humor, maybe a small miracle, but this was art. Every adjustment the mechanic made was purposeful. He didn't just fix the problems he could see, he anticipated the ones that could appear later. He tested, tweaked, and tested again, refusing to settle for anything less than perfection. This wasn't about winning a bet or proving a point, it was about doing the work the right way, with honesty, patience, and skill. As the hours wore on, the engine began to respond. The hum of life returned, smoother than ever. The once troublesome machine was now singing under his hands, and the CEO couldn't help but smile, a mix of astonishment and admiration on her face. The mechanic, however, didn't look up. He was focused, almost meditative, as if the world outside the engine no longer existed. By the time he finally leaned back and wiped his hands, the shop was buzzing quietly with excitement. Everyone had witnessed something rare, someone transforming an ordinary task into a display of patience, intelligence, and quiet determination. This repair wasn't just a job completed, it was a statement: talent, humility, and focus could conquer challenges that others thought impossible. In that moment, the CEO realized she hadn't just challenged a mechanic, she had witnessed a man proving that true skill comes not from confidence or status, but from dedication, heart, and persistence. And just like that, the stage was set for the next unforgettable moment, the moment when skill met recognition, and the humble mechanic's quiet triumph would leave everyone speechless. The shop, once filled with the steady rhythm of tools and engines, now held a different kind of energy. It was quiet, tense, and almost electric. Everyone, mechanics, customers, even the delivery guy passing by, felt it. Something extraordinary was happening, something none of them had anticipated. The engine, under the mechanic's careful hands, was nearing perfection, and the reality of the CEO's audacious challenge was sinking in. The CEO, who had started this as a joke, leaned against her car, arms crossed, a hint of doubt in her eyes. Could he really pull this off? She had thrown out a wild dare, never imagining that a humble mechanic would take it so seriously, and, even more, approach it with such skill and calm determination. Her laughter from earlier had faded into an uneasy silence, replaced by curiosity and, she had to admit, a growing respect. The other mechanics exchanged glances. Some whispered under their breath, "He's actually doing it," others shook their heads in disbelief. They knew this engine was a nightmare for even the most experienced hands. Its stubborn parts and complicated design had given many of them headaches before. Yet here was this quiet, focused man, methodically untangling problems that seemed impossible to solve. As the mechanic worked, small obstacles arose. A stubborn bolt refused to budge. A part didn't fit perfectly. Even the wiring seemed to have a mind of its own. For anyone else, these setbacks might have sparked frustration or panic. But not him. He paused, assessed, and adjusted, his calm determination shining through every movement. Each challenge was met with patience, his mind sharp and steady, like a chess player thinking several moves ahead. The CEO felt a strange mixture of emotions, doubt, fascination, and a hint of something she hadn't expected, admiration. She had assumed the challenge would end in laughter, maybe a failed attempt, maybe even embarrassment. But now, it looked like the mechanic might actually succeed. That realization sent a ripple of tension through the room. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see if this unlikely story would end in triumph or disaster. Even the engine seemed to respond, as if it could sense the intensity in the room. Every turn of the wrench, every adjustment, every careful inspection carried weight. The mechanic was no longer just fixing an engine, he was performing under pressure, proving his skill in the most dramatic way possible. And as the minutes ticked by, the line between doubt and belief began to blur. The tension was thick enough to touch. Everyone watching felt the stakes rising, even if only the mechanic truly understood what was at stake. This was no longer about a car or a challenge, it was about proving talent, patience, and perseverance in front of an audience that didn't expect him to succeed. And yet, he remained calm, almost serene, letting the doubt in the room fade into the background. The CEO, for the first time, wasn't just watching a mechanic. She was watching a man quietly defy expectations, a man proving that humility and skill can speak louder than jokes, laughter, or even status. Her mind raced. If he could actually finish this, what would that mean? Could this moment change the way she saw him, or even herself? And in that charged silence, the shop felt like the stage of a high-stakes drama. Every eye was on him. Every heartbeat seemed louder. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. No one dared speak. The tension was unbearable, yet exhilarating. Everyone knew they were about to witness something unforgettable, the point where doubt meets determination, where skill faces its ultimate test, and where an ordinary shop might witness an extraordinary triumph. Just when it seemed the tension could last forever, the unexpected happened. The mechanic, calm and focused as ever, made a final adjustment to the engine. There was a moment of silence, almost as if time itself had paused, waiting for the outcome. Then, with a low, steady hum, the engine roared to life. It wasn't just working, it was perfect. Smooth, powerful, responsive, as if it had been reborn under his hands. A collective gasp filled the shop. Mechanics who had doubted, whispered, and laughed were now staring in awe. Customers leaned forward from their seats, unable to tear their eyes away. Even the CEO, who had thrown out the challenge as a playful dare, froze, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. The engine wasn't merely repaired, it was transformed. And it had all been done by the quiet, humble mechanic she had underestimated. For a brief moment, the room was filled with a strange energy, part admiration, part disbelief, part excitement. The mechanic wiped his hands on a rag, his face calm, almost serene. He didn't celebrate. There was no boastful grin, no dramatic gesture. The work spoke for itself. It was flawless, undeniable proof of his skill and dedication. The CEO's laughter, which had once been bold and teasing, faded completely. In its place was a soft, almost involuntary smile, mixed with astonishment. She had expected humor, maybe a failed attempt, but what she saw was far beyond anything she had imagined. In that instant, something shifted. She wasn't looking at a mechanic anymore, she was looking at a man whose talent, patience, and determination had earned her genuine respect. Around the shop, the atmosphere changed. The whispers turned into murmurs of admiration. Some of the mechanics shook their heads in disbelief. Others exchanged nods, silently acknowledging that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The engine, now purring perfectly, seemed almost symbolic, a quiet victory over doubt, underestimation, and the impossible. The twist wasn't just that the mechanic succeeded, it was how he did it. He had faced pressure, expectation, and even mockery without losing focus. His humility had never faltered, and yet, in the end, he had triumphed in a way that made everyone rethink their assumptions. The CEO, who had started this as a joke, now realized that life sometimes surprises us in the most unexpected ways. The man she had challenged was more than capable, more than skilled, and far more extraordinary than appearances had suggested. For the first time, she felt something unexpected stirring inside her, a combination of admiration, respect, and curiosity. Could it be that this quiet, humble man had just turned a playful dare into a life-changing moment? Everyone in the room was thinking the same thing, silently acknowledging that what they had just witnessed wasn't ordinary. It was rare, unforgettable, and remarkable. The mechanic, meanwhile, returned to his usual quiet demeanor, ignoring the whispers, the stares, and even the astonished CEO. He simply cleaned his tools and prepared to move on to the next task. For him, the reward wasn't applause or recognition, it was the satisfaction of a job done perfectly, a challenge met with skill and patience. And yet, the room could feel it, something had changed. The CEO's joke had become a moment of revelation. The mechanic's quiet determination had turned doubt into admiration, skepticism into respect. The unexpected twist wasn't just that the engine worked, it was that a simple challenge had revealed the extraordinary nature of a man who had quietly let his talent speak for itself. The moment the engine hummed flawlessly, something shifted in the air. It wasn't just the sound of machinery, it was the sound of triumph, of skill meeting challenge, of patience proving itself in a world that often underestimated quiet talent. The mechanic, calm and composed, had done more than fix a car, he had earned something far more valuable, respect. The CEO, who had started the day with a teasing challenge, now looked at him differently. Her eyes, once filled with playful doubt, were now wide with admiration. She realized that she had misjudged him, not because of his appearance, but because she had assumed confidence and status always spoke louder than skill and integrity. Here was a man who needed no words to declare his worth, his hands had already done it. Around the shop, the atmosphere transformed. Mechanics who had once whispered behind his back now approached him with nods of acknowledgement, a new respect evident in their expressions. Even the customers, who had come expecting a routine visit, were witnessing something extraordinary, a man demonstrating that talent paired with humility is more powerful than arrogance paired with status. Some quietly whispered, "That's the best I've ever seen," while others just stared in awe, unable to put their admiration into words. The CEO, still leaning against her car, stepped forward. She wasn't laughing anymore. She extended her hand, a gesture of recognition, but also something deeper, a silent acknowledgement that this man's dedication and quiet determination had shattered expectations. "I underestimated you," she admitted softly, her voice carrying a mix of humility and awe. "I didn't think anyone could do this." The mechanic simply nodded, a small smile on his face. He didn't need to boast. He never had. His work had always spoken louder than words, and now, everyone in that room had heard the unspoken message: skill, patience, and humility command respect in a way that money, power, or status never can. Even more than the CEO, it was the other mechanics who were impacted. Some felt inspired, realizing that their own abilities could shine if only they approached challenges with focus and dedication. Others felt humbled, reminded that respect is earned, not assumed. The humble mechanic had not only repaired the engine but had repaired assumptions and biases in the minds of everyone watching. For the CEO, this recognition went beyond professional respect. She began to see layers of character that had been invisible at first glance: intelligence, perseverance, integrity, and quiet strength. She had challenged him as a joke, but she now understood that life sometimes surprises us in ways we never anticipate. Sometimes, it takes humility and talent to teach lessons to those who thought they were in control. The mechanic, unaware of the internal reflections of everyone around him, returned to his routine, cleaning his tools and checking the other cars. Yet, the respect he had earned lingered, hanging in the air like a tangible presence. It wasn't just about a perfectly repaired engine anymore, it was about the recognition of true skill, the kind that commands attention without demanding it. In that ordinary shop, an extraordinary moment had unfolded. A challenge that began as a joke had revealed something profound, that genuine talent, paired with humility and determination, could transcend expectation and inspire admiration. The mechanic had shown everyone, CEO, colleagues, and onlookers alike, that respect isn't given, it is earned through dedication, patience, and the courage to quietly prove your worth. And in that realization, a new chapter began, one where the line between admiration and connection was about to blur, where the CEO's respect would evolve into something even more meaningful, setting the stage for the life-changing moment that awaited them both. The shop, once a place of routine and mechanical work, now felt like the center of something extraordinary. The quiet hum of the repaired engine still echoed, a reminder of the mechanic's skill, but the energy in the room had shifted. Respect had been earned, admiration had been established, and yet, something deeper lingered, something even the CEO hadn't anticipated. She stood there, watching him pack away his tools, noticing every small, deliberate movement. There was a grace in the way he worked, a quiet confidence that came not from showing off but from knowing his own worth. It wasn't just talent, it was character. She realized that in her life, she had encountered many people who were loud, ambitious, and quick to impress, yet few who could let their actions, rather than their words, define them. This man did it effortlessly, and it fascinated her. Her mind, usually so sharp and decisive in business, began to race. What had started as a playful dare had now transformed into something far more significant. She had challenged him expecting humor and maybe even a lesson in humility, but he had flipped the script. In front of everyone, he had shown brilliance, patience, and perseverance. And somewhere along the way, she had begun to see him not just as a mechanic, but as someone remarkable, a person whose integrity and quiet strength were impossible to ignore. For the first time, she considered a choice that wasn't logical or calculated. It wasn't a business decision or a strategic move, it was personal, human, and raw. She realized she had the opportunity to acknowledge him in a way that went beyond mere words of respect. It was about connection, about recognizing someone extraordinary and letting that recognition change the course of her own life. Her gaze met his briefly, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. No one else in the shop could see it, but she felt it deeply, a spark of understanding, admiration, and an unexpected possibility for something more. The challenge, the laughter, the engine, it all led to this moment of clarity. Life had handed her a choice, one she hadn't seen coming, to let this extraordinary man slip back into ordinary life, or to honor what he had shown her in a way that could change both of them forever. The mechanic, focused and unaware of the storm of thoughts unfolding in her mind, continued his routine. But she couldn't ignore it. The decision she faced wasn't about status, ego, or pride, it was about sincerity, courage, and the willingness to embrace something completely unexpected. Her heart, usually guarded behind walls of business and control, opened just a little, allowing her to consider a future she hadn't imagined. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, not with jest, not with games, but with honesty. Her voice, soft but certain, carried through the shop. I never expected this, but I see now that you are more than anyone could imagine. I respect you, and more than that, I admire you. The mechanic looked up, finally noticing the depth in her gaze. There was no mockery, no playful challenge, only sincerity. And in that exchange, in that quiet acknowledgement of talent, integrity, and character, the moment transformed. What began as a joke became a turning point, a life-changing decision that neither of them could have predicted. In that ordinary auto shop, amidst the smell of oil and the clang of tools, something extraordinary had begun. Respect had evolved into admiration, admiration into connection, and connection into the possibility of a life neither had imagined, a life shaped by courage, skill, and the quiet power of one man's determination to rise above expectation. The shop, once filled with ordinary tasks and routine hums of machinery, now felt alive in a way no one had expected. What began as a playful challenge had grown into a story that would linger in everyone's minds, a story of skill, determination, and unexpected connection. The engine, now purring perfectly, seemed almost symbolic, a testament to what can happen when talent meets focus and humility meets opportunity. The CEO stepped closer, her usual confident demeanor softened by admiration and newfound respect. She no longer saw the mechanic merely as a skilled worker, she saw a man who had quietly proven himself, not with words or bravado, but with action. The walls she had built around herself, around status, control, and ego, began to shift as she looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. The mechanic, humble as always, glanced up from his work. He had done his best, as he always did, without expecting praise, recognition, or even thanks. But in that moment, he realized something extraordinary was happening. The CEO's gaze wasn't filled with judgment or challenge anymore, it was filled with admiration, respect, and something deeper, something that made his heart skip a beat. The air in the shop was thick with anticipation. The other mechanics watched silently, understanding that this moment was bigger than a repaired engine or a completed challenge. It was about connection, recognition, and the rare magic that occurs when someone quietly proves themselves against impossible odds. Then, with a gentle but decisive voice, the CEO spoke, breaking the silence, "You've done more than fix an engine. You've shown me the power of patience, skill, and integrity. And, you've changed my perspective on everything." There was a pause, a weight in her words, before she added with a playful yet sincere smile, "I think you've earned more than my respect. You've earned my trust, and maybe even my heart." The mechanic's eyes widened slightly, disbelief mixing with warmth. He had never sought attention, recognition, or romantic gestures. Yet, in that ordinary shop, surrounded by the smell of oil and the sound of tools, he realized that life sometimes rewards humility and talent in ways no one could predict. A quiet laugh escaped the CEO, breaking the tension and filling the room with a sense of joy and celebration. The other mechanics smiled knowingly, exchanging glances that said, "We all knew he was extraordinary." Even the customers who had lingered were smiling, witnessing a moment that felt almost magical. In that ordinary auto shop, amidst engines and wrenches, a remarkable transformation had taken place. A playful dare had turned into admiration, respect had blossomed into connection, and connection had opened the door to something neither had expected, the possibility of love. The mechanic, modest as ever, simply nodded, a small smile on his face. No words could fully capture what had happened, but the feeling was unmistakable. In a world full of challenges, doubts, and expectations, sometimes the simplest actions, focused, patient, and sincere, could lead to life-changing outcomes. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the shop, it illuminated a scene that would be remembered for years, a humble mechanic, a daring CEO, a repaired engine, and a quiet miracle that had turned a simple challenge into a story of admiration, love, and triumph. In that moment, everyone understood the truth. Extraordinary things often start with ordinary actions, and sometimes, a single act of determination can change not only a day but an entire life.